Last time we ranked what I consider to be some of the most underrated Nen abilities for combat. This time around, let's discuss some of the most versatile Nen abilities for combat. What can I say? I have a type. Seriously, I have to narrow down my scope somehow, otherwise I'd get overwhelmed with all the potential options, and combat just seems like the most straightforward and intuitive route for me personally. Now, before we get to the rankings proper, as usual, I need to have a whole preamble as to what I do and don't mean when I say versatile Nen abilities. First, I'm talking about Hatsu specifically, and not a Nen user's general skill set. For example, despite being a simple, power-based enhancer, Uvogin's enhancement-based combat skill set was varied enough where he could annihilate a number of shadow beasts while being paralyzed from the neck down, i.e. by biting, spitting, and yelling at them to death. That's versatility if I've ever seen it. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm specifically referring to Hatsu and all the ways one can be used to benefit the user for combat and combat-adjacent purposes. Second, I'm talking about single Hatsu. As in, while Kurapika's abilities all share the same theme of being chain facilitated, they are nonetheless separate abilities, and would therefore not qualify for this list. On the other hand, not that one, I would count an ability like Kite's Crazy Slots as a single Hatsu despite its varied arsenal of weaponry. However, Kite's stringent condition of his weapon pools being mostly randomized means that he is not a serious contender for this list either. I mean, just imagine fighting in a crowded place like Heaven's Arena and getting Silent Waltz. Bad roll indeed. The third and final caveat is that I am talking about combat specifically. While Basho's Great Haiku is extremely versatile and, theoretically at least, pushes the limits of what, in my mind, Conjuration should be capable of, the fact that he not only needs to think of a haiku and write it down for it to manifest, but also that the effect can widely vary in effectiveness depending on the haiku's quality, makes it rather unreliable for combat in my opinion. Not unusable, mind you, just unwieldy enough where I don't think it has a place among the Hatsu I'll mention here. You can consider this its honorable mention. With all that said and established, let's get into it. Let's kick things off with none other than the, in physical terms, strongest royal guard, Yuppie. The reason he's on here as opposed to Poof or Pito is because of Yuppie's ability to change his form and give himself various features and traits to aid him in combat on the fly. His shapeshifting ability has allowed him to sprout wings, spawn multiple eyes, morph his arms into tentacles, shape said tentacles into razor-sharp blades, and so on. He's truly the Swiss Army knife of Chimera ants, and an absolute nightmare to fight against. The only thing that stopped him from being overpowered and arguably the most powerful royal guard was his relatively lackluster intelligence. While his mind did become sharper as the palace invasion went on, he was nonetheless the least, cognitively capable among the three royal guards. Please note that by cognitively capable, I do not mean emotionally stable. Now, the reason he is so low on this list, despite the versatility of his metamorphosis, is because we really can't be sure that it is a proper Hatsu and not a feature of his Chimera ant biology. As I've said quite a few times by now, with a lot of Chimera ants, it's difficult to tell where Chimera ant biology stops and their abilities start, as quite a few seem to have abilities or traits that are seemingly not Nen-based, or at least not Hatsu based. As an amalgamation of numerous magical beasts, Yuppie is particularly difficult to gauge in this regard. While magical beasts are most likely simply creatures that have evolved to utilize the properties of Nen in some way, I wouldn't go as far as to call something like the shapeshifting ability of the Kiriko a Hatsu, since a Hatsu is one's personal expression of Nen, while their abilities are species-wide. As such, even though he should realistically be higher, I'm putting Yuppie at the number 7 spot. At number 6, we have Best Girl Machi and her transmuted threads. Since I talked about her very recently in my top 10 underrated abilities video, I'll just copy-paste the soundbite from that video here. The threads could be used to restrict an opponent's movements by either partially or completely restraining them. They could be utilized to puppeteer people to act as a distraction, hurl objects at people from long range and at various angles, attach the thread to a target to keep track of their movements, reposition the user in an instant, create a defensive perimeter around the user to trap opponents who manage to get too close, almost in an instant mend certain types of injuries, and so on. Since the threads are transmuted, this means that in can be applied to them to make them invisible. And if you think Kurapika inning his chains was dangerous, imagine how difficult it would be to keep track of not only the dozens borderline invisible threads attacking you, but also the literally invisible ones. By the way, a thread's strength is inversely proportional to its length, and a single thread that's a meter long can hold a ton, and what seems to be a single 2-meter thread was enough to totally restrain Owl, meaning that unless the opponent is a power-type enhancer like Uvogin or Finks, or an enhancement-adjacent physical specimen like Silva or Bisky, 3 or 5 shorter threads should be enough to restrain the vast majority of opponents. As far as I'm concerned, this is maybe among the top 5 and definitely among the top 10 most versatile Hatsu we've seen. I'm recycling whole script segments at this point. Only the best of content here on The Overthinker. All in all, I think Machi and her ability are very much slept on, and while she may not be among the troop's top heavy hitters, I'd say that even they would need to take her very seriously were it to come to actual combat. At number 5, we have Razer and his 14 Devils. 2 videos in a row! This is officially a Razer channel, boys! Spread the agenda! Any and all commenters even slightly critical of our man here will be forced to carry a pregnancy stone to term. Tread carefully. Razer is on this list for his capacity to create 8 powerful deft and reactive Nen beasts, and even imbue at least one of them with a semblance of intelligence, which should not be underestimated. We've seen that the Devils are coordinated, agile, and quick enough to take by surprise and one-shot veteran hunters, as well as strong enough when merged that even a physical powerhouse like Hisoka won't even try to contest them in strength. The definitive reason they're on this list, however, is their aforementioned capacity to coordinate and function as a unit. Apart from dominating dodgeball, in an actual fight, they'd be able to serve as the initial vanguard to gauge an opponent's strength, serve as a shield against powerful attacks, surround and overwhelm opponents, bounce Razer's emitted ball to attack the opponent at awkward angles, bait out an opponent's ability or bypass their activation condition due to being emitted entities, and so on. Basically, they should be capable of doing anything an expertly trained fighting unit could. The neat thing is that they can also be reabsorbed back into Razer if he judges that they've fulfilled their purpose, at which point a now much more dangerous Razer would be free to finish off the opponent, supposing it even comes to that. At number 4, we have Heinrich and his very JoJo-esque and consequently borderline nonsensical conjuration-based ability, Biohazard. Biohazard allows Heinrich to turn any device or object he touches into a living creature while retaining the device's functionality. While the Hatsu has numerous applications outside of combat, its more combat-focused implementations include turning guns into snake guns to farm those no-scope headshots, as well as turning handcuffs into pigeons to BDSM his opponents with. I won't even try to give you all the examples of how it could be used in combat, since the ceiling of Biohazard's combat potential is entirely dependent on Heinrich's imagination, skill, and aura output. All I'ma say is pigeon grenades. Pigeonades. Since he can maintain his creations for hours on end, depending on their size and most likely functionality, the neat thing about that is that he can surround himself with what seem like just regular animals to use when necessary, and can mosey about like some kind of Disney princess. To be fair though, he does have the hair for it. By the way, the only reason Biohazard isn't a spot higher is because it does require Heinrich to prep the devices he wants to transform ahead of time, as he cannot conjure them himself. This does also mean that apart from the number 1 and arguably number 2 spot, Heinrich's Biohazard is the Hatsu that can most benefit from prep time. At number 3, we have everyone's favorite murder magician, Hisoka Moro. As you may or may not know, since it is quite the obscure factoid, bungee gum has the properties of both rubber and gum. Now, while on the face of it that sounds like a rather simplistic Hatsu, it's anything but. His dexterous and precise control of his transmuted aura's rubberiness and gumminess has allowed Hisoka to, and call me the overfrauder, cause I'll copy-paste yet another section of an older script, create a surprise attack, a defensive wall, an escape mechanism, strategic positioning. Wall running is a frickin' impromptu flail made in combination with a severed head of the unluckiest bystander ever, and much more. Fraud over. His ability is flexible enough and Hisoka's unpredictable enough with it that it being revealed to his opponent barely helps them prepare any viable countermeasures against it. This isn't the case with every opponent, of course, since apart from rubber and gum, bungee gum has awakened the newfound properties of both cope and seethe. Taking the runner-up spot, we have Best Bro Moral and his ability, Deep Purple. Throughout the Chimera Ant arc, Moral's Deep Purple came in clutch more times than even Knuckle can count. It was used as a smokescreen to conceal Nov's hide-and-seek. Against Cheetu, he used it to create a copy of himself and a nigh-indestructible rope to reel in the speed-brain jackass. Against Leol, he used it to literally make smoke underwater, I'd sing the melody but I'm practically tone-deaf, in order to stay afloat, as well as to create smoke piping to literally breathe Leol to death. Against Yuppie, he created numerous clones of Knuckle to buy time. Against Poof, he created a nigh-indestructible wall of smoke to keep the drama queen and himself trapped and separated from the king. He was able to create long-range, highly responsive Nen soldiers that surpassed Pito's own in quality, if you chose to sacrifice quantity, and so on. While the ability does have the rather stringent condition of him being unable to transmute his aura into smoke without his pipe, which is most likely necessitated by the fact that transmutation is his opposite category, it took a royal guard, taking him by surprise, to finally separate the man from his pipe. I mean, the dude was able to hold onto it while getting Uzumaki, and has enough grip strength to keep a hold on it with one hand in a tug of war against Cheetu. The man said it himself that he's yet to meet someone with a more versatile ability than his own. That said though, I guess we can confirm that he's never crossed paths with our number 1. In first place, as the definitively most versatile ability, we have, as you could have guessed, Chrollo's Bandit Secret. Is it predictable? Yes. Is it nonetheless correct? Yes. I mean, come on, if your Hatsu is capable of stealing and then utilizing almost all the amazingly versatile abilities on this list, of course it's going to take the top spot. Chrollo is like the Batman of the Hunter x Hunter world. With enough prep time, he can create a foolproof contingency plan for even the most dangerous of foes. That analogy only goes so far though, since unlike Batman, he actually has superpowers and isn't consistently fighting opponents way above his level. On the contrary, as an indisputable top-tier combatant, he's the big bad Dancho against whom the vast majority of self-professed badasses would hear boss music when approaching. I mean, the man literally John Wicked a professional assassin sent to kill him. Need I say more? To get back on track, a Bandit Secret was deemed dangerous and unpredictable enough to keep two equally top-tier Nen combatants and world-class assassins, namely the Zoldycks, on their toes in a 2v1 scenario. And bear in mind, this was before Chrollo altered the conditions of his ability to add the bookmark, which now allows him to utilize two abilities at once. Under normal circumstances at least, in reality the number of abilities he can use at once is closer to 3 or 4, which, yeah. While he did mention he now had some additional annoying conditions to deal with, we didn't have the chance to see what they were. Whatever they are though, they definitely didn't stop him from whooping Hisoka's horny ass, and imbuing bungee gum with the aforementioned properties of cope and seethe. The only thing I can think of is that now, if he wants to use the bookmark, he may need to at least attempt and actually explain to his opponent the properties of all the abilities he plans to use against them beforehand. Him going full bleach mode and just spouting off the properties of his abilities could have also just been a flex on his part, meant not only to let Hisoka know just how screwed he really was, but also showcase his resolve and thus further empower his abilities. Whatever the case may be, while I believe there are definitely valid arguments to shuffle a few entries on this list here and there, and unlike the previous list, these are ranked in order, by the way, as well as to possibly add some abilities I didn't mention, I'm confident in asserting that the number 1 and 2 spots are, in my mind, nigh unsurmountable. And that's that. I'm currently being double teamed by both the flu and allergies, so I'ma keep this outro as brief as possible. What did you think? Would you shuffle around any of these entries, or maybe even add an ability I didn't mention? And if so, which one? As always, thank you very much for watching. Your feedback is always appreciated. Subscribe if you'd like more content like this. As usual, I'd very much like to thank Kamaswami and Matt B for going the extra mile in supporting the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.